Hi everyone, welcome to Here We Are, Brattleboro's community talk show. I'm Wendy O'Connell. We're back again this week with someone from the community to talk to us about who they are and what they do, and that person is Keane Southard. Keane is a composer and pianist who believes deeply in the power of music to inspire positive change in the world. Doesn't that sound great? His unique perspective embraces a wide range of musical styles and topical issues. Keane is the organist and choir master at St. Michael's Episcopal Church. His most recent composition, Requiem for Animals, was commissioned by the Brattleboro Music Center, and it will be performed by the Brattleboro Concert Choir, directed by Jonathan Harvey. The concert will take place on May 17th and 18th in Persons Auditorium at Potash Hill in Marlborough. Welcome, Keane.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Great to have you on the show. You are another musician that we have in our midst, and it's so exciting because you're doing something that is different from everyone else that I've had on the show. And as I told you, I was writing up a list of all the different musical organizations and groups in Brattleboro, and it's mind-blowing how many we have. It's so cool. So it's wonderful to have you with us in Brattleboro. And you've been here about a year and a half?
It was the end of July 2023 when we moved here.
And what brought you to Brattleboro?
I was offered a position to be music director at St. Michael's Episcopal here in town. And my family and I, we'd actually lived in the area before in Walpole, New Hampshire for a year. This was before I went back to school, to the Eastman School of Music to get my PhD in composition. But we loved this area, and when this opportunity came up, we just thought, yeah, this is the right place for us.
When did you start writing this Requiem? Was it before you got here? Did you have it in the back of your mind to work on?
The idea came before I got here. I think it was fall 2022, maybe, when I read an article, it was on NPR on their website, about the decline of wildlife animal populations around the world, declining something like 60-something% in the past 50 years. And, such a huge loss of life and animal life really, I don't know, just made me feel, I had an emotional response to it, and processing those emotions and thinking about it. Somehow then I started thinking about a requiem, and lots of composers have composed these requiems, these masses for the dead, but I realized all the ones I know, by famous composers like Mozart and Fauré and Verdi, they've all been for humans.
Yeah.
And I thought, has anyone ever written one for animals? Because, that loss of life for animals is so huge, and I think not as many people are aware of how many, for instance, wildlife we lose. Farmed animals are killed every year. So, I did a little Google search, and there was one, that I found, but it was focused all on companion animals and pets, which compared to the amount of wildlife and farmed animals is a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage. And so it just spurred my creativity, and I started thinking more about, that would be really interesting to use texts from the Latin Requiem and combine it with maybe other texts that address animals and how we interact with animals, and commemorating the loss of animal life together. And then, it started just as an idea, and I started thinking, maybe it could be a choral piece, and I started contacting some choral directors, choral conductors that I knew, and seeing if they were interested in this idea. And that was about a year of just putting together that idea, not even writing a note, but just sort of imagining what this project might be. And then right as I got to move to Brattleboro, some of my singers at St. Michael's said, you have to meet Jonathan, because most of my choir at St. Michael's sings in the Brattleboro Concert Choir
Huh.
with Jonathan. They said, "You've got to meet him. He's great." And so I contacted him. We set up a coffee date at Mocha Joe's, and this was a couple days I think after we arrived. And I told him about the idea, and he said, "That sounds great. I think we'd be really interested in that." So that started the collaboration. But then, actually after that was thinking about funding it, and because writing a big piece like that is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And as a professional, making that's part of how I make a living. So then we thought we're looking at funding options, and we applied for a couple of grants, and luckily we actually got two of them. One from the Eric Stokes Fund, which is a fund. Eric Stokes was a composer who taught at the University of Minnesota and passed away, and his estate set up this fund to help composers and performances of especially music that is on environmental themes and things like that. And then also another grant from the Culture and Animals Foundation, which, I thought the perfect fit right there.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I spent about 10 months actually doing the nitty-gritty composing, writing all the notes out and compiling the text and putting it all together, essentially all by myself. And then I gave it to the choir, and they've been rehearsing it for the past couple months.
Oh, wow.
To bring it to life.
Wow. Well, there are so many aspects about this that we're going to talk about. And I actually read the text or libretto. I'm not sure which that is. It's very moving, and the contrapuntal thing of the you have a chorus who sort of a Greek chorus almost, which is doing a litany of all of the extinct species
yes,
going on.
in one of the movements.
Yes, and then you've got Latin. You've got the Latin going on, but you've interspersed the Latin with excerpts from like Upton Sinclair, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a difficult process to find potential texts, sift through them, think about where they might fit, which one, and it was a lot to think about on the sort of large scale, and then also think about all those little details, of how it all fits together,
Right.
what notes go where, and everything like that.
Yeah, well, that's composing, which is like so far out of my reach. I can't even have a conversation with you about that. But I was just so moved by how moving, just the written material was. My guess is that you were motivated by emotion, by a feeling about this.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're right. It can be a difficult thing to live with something like that for such a long time and an intense period of creation of this project. But at the same time, for me, I've been aware of this for a decade, 2 decades, in terms of how many what's happening to our ecosystem, what's happening in our food system, and things like that. So for me, it was a little easier to, it wasn't like I was able to separate it, I think, a little bit more, the emotions from the work of doing it. But you're right that this has actually been a challenge for the choir itself, because I am asking the choir to, live with and explore things and think about things that maybe some people don't want to think about, and see things in a different way that they, maybe are not used to seeing. And but one of my goals in writing this piece was to be a catalyst for those sort of reflections, those sort of conversations.
Yes.
And in one way, of course, I'm writing this also for the audience that'll be there, but also for the singers, And the Brattleboro Concert Choir, we've got about 100 singers singing in this. And, I get little sort of reports from some of my choirs at St. Michael's about how things are going, and also from Jonathan. But, one time they said, a few weeks ago, we had a rehearsal, and the whole first hour of the 2 hours we just talked.
Wow.
We didn't sing a word.
Wow.
We just talked about the text we're singing and the music, and grappling with some of these issues about. So, for example, probably the most difficult part emotionally of the piece is this excerpt from Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, which takes place in a slaughterhouse. And there's a little bit of graphic imagery too. And I actually paired that with the part of the Requiem Mass, the Dies Irae, the Day of Wrath, which is all about, the Day of Judgment and, scary things. And I thought that's a really good fit, sort of, with talking about the consequences, the scary sort of consequences of some of the ways we have treated animals as humans, on a large scale.
Yeah.
And so, they had a really good discussion on that. And some people, had reservations, and some people, thought things like, well, it's hard, but it's really important. They had a lot of different viewpoints, and I was really pleased that they had that conversation, because, I'm not trying to tell them or the audience what to think.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to give them an emotional experience that is different than just saying a list of facts or something like that. It's about feeling it. And that's what the music can do, is make you feel it on an emotional level.
Yeah.
And so, for instance, you mentioned the movement where some of the choir sings this Latin text, the Lux Aeterna, which is let perpetual light shine down on those who have passed. And while others are singing a list just of 32 wildlife species that have gone extinct, primarily due to human activities. And so, if you just list those, it's not the same as singing and having this music with it. It can make it feel a much stronger emotional connection.
Yes. Some of the other requiems that you've done are about climate change, nonviolence, wind energy, environmental conservation, reducing waste. So you are taking these things on, and as I said in the intro, you believe deeply in the power of music to make change.
I think music can be a lot of different things, and sometimes, as in the pieces of mine that you've talked about, that you just mentioned, I am trying to really tie it to, issues and topics that are important to the world today. But there's plenty of pieces also that I am not doing that.
Yeah.
Music can be, something that helps you think in a different way, challenges you in a certain way. It can be something that comforts. And I've written music that is very comforting too.
Yeah.
I've written a lot of music that is doesn't have any of these sort of extra musical associations. It's not about a topic or anything, Sonata number 1 for piano, like it's just abstract music.
Yeah.
And I find value in that too. So there's lots of different, I never like to limit what music is or what I can do with music.
Yeah.
And I like to do all different kinds of things depending on, what it is I'm interested in, what I'm trying to do in the moment, what I feel.
And where you are in your life as well, Was there anything in your life growing up that led you there, to that kind of thinking?
I'm a father now of a 3-year-old, and thinking about how did my parents raise me, and what do I want to do the same, what do I want to do differently. I grew up in a pretty small town in Massachusetts, a not very diverse town, but I think my parents did a really good job, for instance, of having me interact with lots of different people, of different cultures, of different races. Looking back on it, I was like, oh yeah, even though I had a lot of friends that looked like me, I had teachers and people in the community that, like, my parents really made the effort to instill those values in me that, are still an important part of me, and then become an important part of my music and what I share.
Did you play music as a kid?
Oh yes, I started playing the piano at age 7. My mom played the piano and sang, not as a professional musician, but she played all growing up. She even took piano lessons in college, but she wasn't a music major. We had a piano in the home, and I think I wanted to play just because my mom did. And I remember as a kid sitting at the piano, and you'd see someone on TV play the piano, and it looks like they're just randomly and I'd like, maybe I'll hit the right notes if I just randomly, And I apparently really just took to it and took off and progressed really quickly.
Yeah.
And I started playing some other instruments, like in the school band, clarinet. I played violin for a couple of years. And then when I was probably in middle school, for some reason I got the idea, like, oh, I can just create my own music. How cool is that?
Really?
Like these composers that I like, pieces that I'm playing in my piano lessons, I can make something like that too. And at first I was writing, I was both influenced by classical piano music. I loved playing Chopin and Beethoven and Brahms. But then I was also at that time getting into, especially rock music from the 60s and 70s, the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Queen, like thanks to my older brother, Led Zeppelin, taught myself guitar. And so I was both trying to write kind of imitations of Chopin and then like imitations of the Beatles, and both being nowhere near as good as their models, but I learned a lot from that, and that's how I think a lot of composers start, is imitating what they like, finding out how it works, and then eventually you start, taking things from different types of influences, and it mixes all together, and comes out eventually as something that is unique to you, and you go, wow, this really is not quite anything like anything else that's out there.
That's wonderful for you to recognize that. I'm sure it feels good. Right, also, for you to recognize that you really found your voice, and you are continuing to find your voice. And
it's never-ending process of learning and growing and trying to create ever better music.
Yeah, and you've won a lot of awards. You've been in competitions, you've had residencies, you went back, you got your master's, and then you got a PhD. So this is a real deal going on here, right?
Yeah.
This is your career, and you've gone in it really deeply with all of the knowledge that you have and with all that you've studied, to realize that there's still these very ephemeral things, ineffable things about music, that must sort of continually surprise you.
Yeah, no matter how closely you analyze a piece of music, there's always something mysterious. There's something beyond explanation.
Yeah.
And so I also teach composition lessons to students online. And one thing I always talk about is there's two different kind of modes you can be in composing. There's a kind of intuitive mindset where, what we associate with creativity is the right brain or left. I always forget which side of the brain is with that. But one of those sides of the brain, right, where you're going based on instinct and feel and trusting your ear, right? And coming up with ideas, and you don't know where they come from. But then there's another side, the more rational side, the other part of your brain, where you're thinking more consciously, more critically about, for instance, music theory concepts, how it's actually put together. And I think if you're only on one side, if you're only on the intuitive side, then maybe you think everything you improvise is, perfect, when it could be better if you then moved into the rational side and think more critically about how you could shape it. And if you're only on the rational side, then things become formulaic and not so creative. So it's, it's that same sort of dichotomy of you can't explain it all, but it's also shouldn't be all unexplainable.
For you to be able to integrate, the right brain and to get them to work together, right? And,
having a balance.
Produce something, is really, that's sort of key, and that's how you manifest things too, which is pretty exciting that you've been able to do that. And you've performed around the world as well. This performance coming up, I know that you haven't witnessed it yet, but have you been in the audience to hear your compositions performed?
Oh yes, of course. And that is such a strange and unique and terrifying and rewarding
Yeah.
experience. I think that there's almost no other experience like that, where you spend all this time essentially on your own, creating something, imagining how it's going to sound. But most of the time, I'm writing for not myself to bring to life, right? If I'm writing something for piano, I can play it on my own and I can
Right.
hear the ultimate realization of it. But for instance, with this Requiem for a choir plus a string orchestra, I can't make that on my own. I don't play the string instruments. I don't sing soprano. My voice doesn't go that high. I can't, even with, if I tried to record different tracks and, I can't make it on my own.
Yeah.
I make the sort of blueprint, imagine it, but I need a group of others to bring
Yeah.
it to life.
Yeah.
But in doing so, oftentimes I am not a part of the performance. I mean, sometimes, I've conducted my own works. I play in the ensemble with other people. But oftentimes I'm in the audience and it's out of my hands.
Yes.
It is, I'm entrusting it to
Yeah.
this group of people. And I'm sitting there and just hoping it goes well. And occasionally it's gone very badly too.
Oh, really?
I've had some really bad performance. Luckily, not very often. Most times it's really wonderful. But it's a bit terrifying,
Yeah.
Here's something so intimate,
Yes.
and personal that I've created. And now it's in your hands.
Yes.
And the only other similar experience I could think would be a playwright having their play produced, where they're not the director, they're not the actors. Even a filmmaker isn't doing the acting and all those things, but has control over the final cut. During a performance, I don't have control anymore.
That's right. That's right. Anything could happen.
Yeah, it's true. I try to think about, I feel that art can be either selfish or selfless. Selfish being, I've created this great piece of music. Look how wonderful a composer I am, or look at what I can do, And I try to remind myself to be, I'm certainly not perfect at this, but to think more selflessly in terms of, I'm sharing this,
Yeah.
I want to share this experience with you. I want you to have, as a kind of gift that I'm giving, where it's not necessarily about me. It's about the experience. It's about everything that's within it.
Yeah.
And sort of remove myself from the situation in a way.
Yeah, and that's a really beautiful, not only concept, but the action of that, sort of creates its own dynamic, right? When you've created something and you're giving it and you're receiving it and they're receiving it, it's quite remarkable. And I think that actually, in terms of live performance especially, to be in an audience and to experience that is part of the whole impact, I guess, of whatever the musical piece is.
Yeah. You feel much more of a connection, from the audience to the performers, being right there, seeing them, hearing them, sensing them in a way. And I love recordings. Recordings are wonderful, because that brings so much more music than we wouldn't have access to otherwise. And maybe too much in a way, because I can't listen to it all and I want to. It's interesting to think about, before we had recordings, back in Mozart, Beethoven's day,
Yeah.
what music did they have access to? They only had access to the music they could hear in person, in concert, or that they could play themselves, that they could get sheet music that they could play on the piano. But nowadays, so Mozart didn't know what was being created in India or in different, all these different countries outside of Europe and all those sort of things. So his potential musical influences were so much tinier than nowadays, when you can go online and instantly find so many different types of music. And it's very but you can't, we still have 24 hours in a day. You can't listen to, more music in the amount of time.
Yeah.
But there's so much more available to us.
Yeah.
It's actually really overwhelming. My listening list as well as my reading list, of books, never seems to get any shorter. It only gets longer.
It's true. Yeah. People keep just producing this stuff, and we can't keep up. So it's asking us a lot about how to discern and how to make those choices. So this concert that's coming up is almost 100 singers you've got?
Yeah, I think it's around 100 singers.
That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people.
It's a good-sized choir.
And 20 strings in the
around
orchestra.
20 or so, I think, yeah.
And Jonathan is conducting.
Yes,
this,
Jonathan Harvey.
Is in very able hands. It's really exciting.
I really appreciate that Jonathan, from when I told him about this idea, has been completely supportive of it.
Yeah.
Even with, the issues that have come up with it in terms of, the subject matter and things like that. He has been really wonderful to work with.
Yeah.
I'm really thankful for him.
Yeah, he has fabulous demeanor when it comes to working with people. There's something about your conscience that came up for me, like it's almost like you feel like your conscience is bringing these things forward, like you're compelled to a certain degree, right?
Yeah.
To bring up these things because they're deeply felt.
Yeah, and music, especially contemporary classical music, has often been a very esoteric field, right? I mean, back in the, the late part of the 20th century, in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, when composers were exploring all different things, often playing concerts for, a handful of people in the audience, or mostly for other composers even, And there was this sense of, do they really care about communicating something to an audience? Is it just about sort of, they talked about like research in music, like just exploring possibilities for exploring it. It's kind of like a scientist, rather than communicating something important to the audience. And, when I was in school, I had this sort of realization that like, I love music, but like, do I really want to just be making it for a small handful of people? How can I make, especially as when I was in college, I was learning about, more about the world and the these global issues and problems and crises that we're running into. And then I'm just sitting here playing around with notes and, like, how do I use what I'm passionate about to help in whatever way, address those issues, help people think about those issues with the platform I have, or how do I grow that platform? It's smaller than, for instance, pop musicians, but it can still make an impact. If you, 100 singers in this choir thinking about an issue that otherwise they might not have, and hopefully hundreds more at the concerts.
That's right.
And then hopefully more performances after that. It's a seed that can grow into a tree.
Absolutely, and music, I think more than anything else, I always think of things like that ripple out, from them and to the wider world. And music certainly vibrationally does that.
And it's a similar thing with teaching, and I started as teaching as a teaching assistant during my master's degree, and not really knowing if it would be something I was really interested in, but it was helping pay my way through graduate school. But I really liked it, and it's the same sort of thing. Teachers never, well, not never, but usually don't know what change they make, and the ripple effects of that. But it's interesting what looking back on what things I remember from my teachers and what really sticks with me and what lessons I learned and take forward, and that they probably never knew that, unless I came back to them and said, that really stuck to me.
So much of it is about who we are, right? And that's what's really affecting people more than anything else.
There's a wonderful arts advocate named Eric Booth, who I met, who says 80% of what you teach is what you are.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's great. Well, Keane, you've got a big weekend coming up, May 17th and May 18th, just so everybody knows. The Requiem for Animals for Chorus and String Orchestra, at Persons Auditorium, Marlboro Music at Potash Hill in Marlboro. It's going to be an exciting weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so get tickets actually ahead of time.
Tickets through the Brattleboro Music Center. They're on their website.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Keane, for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah.
That's good. That's always a good sign. Thanks.
Yeah.
Stay tuned to the show. We've got various people on, and just tune in and see who's there. Thanks for being with us.